This is Chapter 2, Part 1 of When Realms Bind. King Akbar is finally waking up from where he was in the shaft. He sees three people. He doesn't know whether they are good or bad. One of the characters has his CV chain. King Akbar force pushes the first guy he sees, jumps up from where he lays, and forces the CV chain from the hand of the other person and into no hand. King Akbar just remembered he has no left hand, and he is impressed with the fact that he used the force without his hands. He did not know if he was going to be able to do that. A third person flies up with a gold sar, preparing for an attack. King Akbar notices that he looks very familiar. Do you know one of the sisters? I'm one of the brothers. Huh, that's really interesting. Wait, I know you. Who are you? I'm King Akbar. Of course you are. Wait, I know all of you. You're not too. You're Walton Flocka, and you are the brother. Aren't I glad to see you? These three guys were all subjects in his kingdom, which is really interesting because now King Akbar knows that there are people from the world he was transported from are here. He doesn't know exactly how they got here, but he's exhausted after getting up so quickly and thinking that he was going to have to fight for his life. You guys have to take care of me. I'm going to pass out. King Akbar passes out. We'll take him to our compound. They travel some ways for some odd hours, but looking out in the distance, they see that their compound has gone up in flames. They're still about 3 miles away from the compound. The brother and Natu fly out in front, while Walton Flocka and King Akbar stay behind. King Akbar is still passed out, and they reach a little outpost area. At this outpost area, they find 4 of the people from the compound who are hiding out, and they say, "We don't know if anyone else is alive." As they're trying to figure everything out, they see a car driving out over towards them, coming from the compound. Inside is a character with a very important and very secret last name, Spike Jonze, and President Blockbuster, who's driving. Suddenly, an Iron Man orc flies by, and Natu chases after the orc in the Iron Man suit. They look out into the distance and see that the car has an orc chasing after it. "So, you have an orc problem," says the brother to one of the 4 at the outpost. "Don't we always? They came with a big one. Let's do this." The brother asks the 4, Chester, Saucy Seraph, Oil Slick, and Robobai, to take cover with their weapons ready. The brother then flies up into the sky to get a better look on the incoming car and the orc trailing behind. The orc, the one that's behind the car, is able to jump up onto the car, and so he's fighting the guy with the interesting last name and Spike Jonze. All of a sudden the car gets twisted and tipped, and it smashes into this giant rock-looking thing. It crashes very close to the outpost. President Blockbuster gets stuck inside the car, and Spike Jonze flies from the car. The guy with the interesting last name flies from the car as well, and is knocked out of view from most. And so he's probably not going to be seen. The orc does not fly forward, but rather falls backwards, and so has to get up and pass by the crashed car to continue his onslaught. They're all kind of hurt, and everyone realizes that President Blockbuster is still in the car. Chester runs to help him. As he's going towards President Blockbuster, an orc passes by the car and turns to the side, sees Chester and President Blockbuster, because Chester's trying to get President Blockbuster out of the car. And the orc goes after them. Spike Jonze runs and starts to fight the orc, but he rips Spike Jonze in half! So now Spike Jonze is dead. Chester is trying to hold him back with a plethora of bullets, but orcs are tough as nails. The brother comes in with the gold sar and slices the orc in half, causing the orc to be totally destroyed, or so they think. He's still moving on the floor with his arms, and slowly but surely makes his way to grab Oil Slick, one of the survivors, and rips him in half as well. The brother, appalled by the orc's heavy metal mentality and revolting brutality, sighs and chops the orc's head off, killing him. Gunshots then start firing from the sky. 2 orcs have gotten up on the ledge and are now shooting from its peak. One of the orcs jumps down and starts running towards them. There are 2 guys, Saucy Sheriff and Robabai, firing at the orc. The orc takes some hits, but his armor is strong and so takes the bullets well. He then uses his own highly powerful gun to fire at the 2. Saucy Sheriff gets shot down, and Robabai ducks for cover. This whole time, Walton Flocka is trying to wake up King Akbar to help in the fight, but is unsuccessful thus far. The orc that killed Saucy Seraph is still firing. The brother is having a lot of difficulty with defeating him. The orc continues to fire towards the brother, while Chester manages to finally remove President Blockbuster from the blast, because President Blockbuster was still in the car. The orc sees Chester doing this, though, and roars before running towards him. Suddenly, WRB comes from behind and starts firing at the orc in his weak spots. He takes a few hard hits before turning around. Suddenly, blasts from the cliff erupt again. The other orc fires on WRB. He, with the other orc, continue firing on him until he's dead. With a roar, the other orc starts to hurry down towards the group. To summarize thus far, the brother, Chester, President Blockbuster, and the guy with the interesting last name are still alive and fighting against the orc in the camp, although the guy with the interesting last name is still knocked out. The other orc is running down towards the mountain at top speed. Natu is chasing the orc man, or the Iron Man orc, and Walton Flocka is still trying to wake up Kid Akbar. And Saucy Sheriff, Robobai, Oil Slick, and Spike Jones are all dead. Alright, the brother works to fight against the first orc that went down the hill, but the orc is able to knock the gold saw from his hand. The orc then grabs the brother's wing and throws him in the sand. The orc readies his weapon to kill the brother. Finally, he is held up into the sky by an unknown force and thrown into the flames of the car. After residing in the flames for a few seconds, the orc who was on fire is lifted up into the sky and decimated. The other orc, at this point, has made it down the hill. He too is grabbed quickly by an unknown force and then brought through the air to the source of his power. It's King Akbar. King Akbar looks at the orc in the eye, smiles, and quickly ends his victim. Suddenly, the Iron Man orc flies through the air past King Akbar. Natu is close behind him. King Akbar simply sends Iron Man orc into the ground and crushes him. Natu is pleased that the chase is over. They suddenly hear, though, in the distance, the sound of heavy footsteps. King Akbar looks to see a giant orc coming their way. The giant orc continues its charge towards the group, and King Akbar prepares himself to fight. The others step back because they recognize their inability to help the situation too much. King Akbar throws his lightsaber. Throws his lightsaber towards the giant orc, but the giant orc manages to dodge it with fairly decent ease. The giant orc then throws his sword over the head of King Akbar. He ducks as well, and the sword flies over his head and into the ground. When the sword hits the ground, though, it bends away from King Akbar and then snaps back and into the back of his head. King Akbar falls over unconscious, and everyone else is like, Natu, Walton Flocka, and Chester all grab weapons to fight the giant orc. President Blockbuster and the brother pull King Akbar back and try to wake him up. The guy with the interesting last name is still knocked out. Natu flies with his jetpack into the giant orc. After knocking him back a bit, the giant orc picks him up and slams him onto the floor. He then takes off his helmet and throws it to the side. Finally, he throws him in the opposite direction of where he threw the helmet. He runs towards Natu to finish him off. The brother flies up and towards the giant orc to stop him. The giant orc beats the brother to Natu and, instead of grabbing Natu, grabs Natu's gun and fires at the brother. He dodges the bullets and flies back to get a wider view of how to stop the giant orc. As the brother flies back, though, the giant orc pauses briefly and then drives his fist into Natu's jetpack. The brother watches it explode, both consuming Natu and sending the giant orc back onto the ground. He stands, now on fire, and runs towards Walton Flocka, Chester, and the rest. The brother flies down to again stop the giant orc. He soars down, dodges the giant orc's blow, and sends his gold saw into the giant orc. The giant orc stumbles backwards a bit. As the brother draws the gold saw from the orc's side, the giant orc then begins to turn into gold. Once a part of his body turns to gold, it detaches from him as if it were sawed off. Knowing this, the giant orc begins to expedite the process of destruction. He ignores the wound and charges even faster to the rest. The brother, a bit shocked at the giant orc's reaction to his attack, flies down and towards him for another jab. He dodges the giant orc's blow and again drives his gold saw in. This time, the giant orc holds onto the gold saw already driven to his back and then grabs the brother with his other hand. After apprehending the brother, the giant orc pulls the gold saw from his back and throws it to the side. He then, after falling onto his face, grabs the brother with both hands. The brother tries to fight back, but is fruitless in his efforts. As the giant orc's upper chest detaches from his lower half, as the last gold-covered piece falls to the ground, he tears the brother in half. They both lie on the sand. King Akbar wakes up after a few minutes and asks if everyone is okay. President Blockbuster points and shakes his head. King Akbar then stands and rushes towards Chester and Walton Flocka, who are looking down at the brother. The joint orc has now turned completely into gold pieces, and the brother, who is still alive, asks King Akbar to come closer. "I have a gift for you, King Akbar." The brother offers his stone hands to King Akbar, who, if you remember, lost one. So King Akbar takes one stone hand and puts it in his back pocket, and then places the other one into the hole where his hand used to be. King Akbar thanks the brother as Walton Flock helps King Akbar attach one of the stone hands to his arm. The brother then closes his eyes and dies. King Akbar turns around after about a minute to see the man with the interesting last name now awake walking towards the group. President Blockbuster is close behind him. They all stand together and for the first time formally get introduced by Walton Flocka to King Akbar. "President Blockbuster, sir. Chester, East Ramor Pallet. A pleasure to meet you all. I am King Akbar." President Blockbuster smiles and replies to King Akbar. "I knew an Akbar once. You were probably named after him." Soon after, all 5 of the survivors leave. It should be noted that Walton Flocka takes Natu's helmet for his own and leaves his own helmet in the sand. East Ramor Pallet takes a gun from one of the orcs. King Akbar picks up the gold sar. The 5 silently make their way across the landscape. They have no other allies. Blockbuster explains that the orcs had already killed about 23 men at the main base, and there may be others in other places, but in far-off distances. And so, they do what they can to find somewhere new to call home. They travel through towns, oftentimes not speaking unless necessary, and do as such for about a month and a half. During this time, King Akbar leads the group and usually speaks on the group's behalf as they walk through the towns. Chester and East Ramor Pallet talk occasionally as well. But President Blockbuster and Walton Flocka say almost nothing for the whole month and a half. They do not bond through words. Rather, they bond through each other's presence. After the month and a half, they find themselves in a small chasm at night. As they travel through the chasm, they see a light of fire behind some rocks. They decide to check the fire out with caution, of course. Oh, never mind. Oh, alright, Walton Flocka scouts out the area to see how many people are around the fire. As he makes his way around the rocks, though, he gets shot unexpectedly and drops to the floor. East Ramor Pallet is the first to move into the line of fire. Now, with a very powerful gun he took from the orc, he sprays bullets at Walton Flocka's adversary as King Akbar flies up to get a bird's eye view. As he flies up, he in horror watches as Sharper Arat and Pine Tree Crossfire get shot down. He hears Rapper Chewy howling in fear behind some small rocks. To save as many friends as possible, King Akbar flies down to Pallet to stop him. He also yells for the rest of the group to disengage. Pallet has already stopped, though. His mouth is open and his eyes are wide. King Akbar walks towards the victims of Pallet and looks for signs of life. Sharper Arat is dead, and Pine Tree Crossfire is injured. Rapper Chewy is fine, though, and gives King Akbar a big Wookiee hug. King Akbar groups up the survivors and says that there should be no bad blood. Everyone was merely looking out for their friends. King Akbar, once everyone has disengaged from the fight, goes to Pallet in private and asks why he stopped firing before he called him off. "Because Sharper Arat was an ally," says Pallet. "If I knew it was him, I never would have fired." "How do you know Sharper Arat?" "I met him when I left my position as the king's advisor. I joined a man named Vocham Sparrett. Arat was a member of his company." "Do you know the names King Regnum, Sir Reginald, and Avum Dearo?" "Indeed." King Akbar, shocked. "Before I was separated from them, King Regnum wanted to return to his kingdom. Why are you not there? Is it no more?" "It is there still," says Pallet, "but it is unrecognizable. Many foreigners moved into our lands after I and almost every good man was murdered by the warrior of the south." Akbar is more shocked. "When we returned from death," Akbar gets more shocked. "We found them in our lands and had to work with them." Now, the system looks more like a republic and less like a monarchy these past days. There is still good people there, though. The system began to fall apart, though, and soon after it began. It began as a last resort, and so it is not surprising that it devolved. I left because I no longer saw my kingdom. My armor lies within a secret place in the kingdom, and I hope to one day go back to it when the time is right. Hey, you know King Regnum is still alive, says King Akbar. At least when I split off from the group. He may return to the throne. That is good news. His brother is folding like a bad hand to the foreigner's plans for government and rule. Also, I believe the warrior of the south died a hero. He was killed by a strong foe while fighting for the king. I would have never thought that day would come. It was probably the warrior of the east that killed him, if he is in fact dead. How ironic, but never mind that. He has attempted to claim the throne since the opening of the End, this warrior of the east. And just so the viewers know, the opening of the End is what they call their departure from the second death through the Northern Flame's power, but they don't know it was the Northern Flame that did that. They just came back from the second death. All right. Back to Eastern Morpallet. Thankfully, the two defenders reside in the kingdom, and a new religion may be protecting us, one that the foreigners brought to us. Do I believe? IDK. But it does appear to be one of the best things happening in these lands since our return. Vochum was very attached to its mystery and power when I left him. After more dialogue together, they regroup the team and continue on to find a new way home. It should be noted that Pine Tree Crossfire and Rapper Chewy do not communicate in a way that King Akbar can understand, leaving the death of King Regnum a mystery.